And I'm going to go there in Windows Explorer. And if you notice, all these folders correspond to the names of my projects and packages in Eclipse. So right now I'm under CS210, SRC. Oh, well, I haven't got to the program yet, but I'll show you this shortly. You would go to the folder that corresponds to the package in Eclipse, and you'll see the data file there, basically.
Excuse me, teacher.
Yeah.
You didn't record the class.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. This recording stuff is new this year for me. Okay. So let's see. So I have a bunch of different code examples to show you here. I'll go there in a minute. Let me get through a few more slides. Okay. Okay, so we've used the scanner object already when reading in input from the keyboard, right? We use scanner, and then we used things like next int or next line to get the input from the keyboard. Now we can still use a scanner object. So scanner name equals new scanner, but we're pointing it to the data file object we created. So here, file equals new file, mydata.txt, scanner input equals new scanner of file. So input is our scanner object, and this is what in the other programs we would have like input.nextInt, input.nextLine to get that user input, like in the word search program. Now we're pointing it at the file object. So we're kind of redirecting that input and output to our data file. And I'll show you an example of this in Eclipse. So here it's talking about again, this is an example of an absolute path. So like C document Smith HW6 input data.csv. Relative path, you might just have one directory or no directory at all, and then the name of the file.
So for we can't. It's necessary to use scanner, right? We can replace a scanner by file.
In these examples, we need both, because the file object is for the data file. The scanner is for reading in the data.
So we can do like file input equal to new file.
Yeah, you're redirecting the input to the data file, whereas in our previous examples, the keyboard input data went to input. Now we're going to get the data from the data file.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, before I get into exceptions, let me show you an example of the data file here. Okay, this is a program that the data file is names.txt, and this is in CS210 chapter 6. So I'm going to go back to my workspace path, and I'm under CS210, and I'll go to chapter 6. And here is the data file that we're going to be reading. So names.txt. And if we open this up in Notepad, which is a text file, it's just got a long list of names. And I believe these are rankings of how common the name was in the US over certain years. And I have no idea if this data is accurate or they just mocked this up as a goofy example. So that's the raw data file. So here's the code. This library there, including java.awt, that's for graphics. You'll talk about that more in CS211. Here they're importing java.io for the file object, and they're importing java.util.star for the scanner object. And then here's the beginning of the class, public class, baby names. They create a constant variable. We know it's constant because it's public static final string named input file, and the name of that input file is names.txt. That's the data file we just looked at. And then there's some other constants here, like start year 1900, decades 11, width 50. So and this is broken out into a few methods here. So here, scanner file equals new scanner, new file of input file. Remember, input file is declared as names.txt. String line equals, and then they call the method getData, and they're passing in the name of the file. Sorry, this string variable name, and then the name of the file. So if we go down to get data, here's this method. So they have the string variable, the name of the file for the scanner. They have a while loop. And then here, string line. So line is just one long string variable. They're going to use this to parse the file one line at a time. So string line equals file dot next line. So this is really similar to our previous code where, like the word search program where we had, string search word equals like input dot next line. Well, now they're simply getting that data from the data file instead of from the keyboard console. And again, like these few lines, they're very mechanical. For the most part, the names of the variables might change, but what you do to connect the input stream to the file doesn't change much. The rest of this is kind of some graphics that is kind of out of scope of what we're going to cover, but I'll run this and you can see what this is doing here. Okay, so enter a name, click Joe. So here's the popularity, the rank. So number 38 in 1900 is just gone way down. Here's the graphics. This is out of scope of this quarter, but it looks kind of cool. And again, I think some of these names sounds accurate actually. Like for instance, the French, I have some French ancestors, and it seemed like half of them were all named Henry. And you can see it used to be really more popular, at least early 1900s. It's kind of gone down too. So, and then let's look at we looked at the data file. But this program, we could get the input of names from the user. It would be a lot of data entry. But we wouldn't have to change, a lot of the core logic of this program would remain the same, even if we were getting the data from the keyboard. So that, just to review here, the key components here are, we needed the import java.io for file IO, import java.utils for the scanner, and then it's the file object and the scanner object. Then there's another, I'll show you a program where it's writing to the file instead of reading from it. Okay, 12.2. I wanted to name one of my sons Henry because our last name is Hufid. And I told my wife, yeah, it's really cool. I really like names where the first and last name start with the same letter because it sounds really cool. Like, so I said, yeah, Henry Hufid, would sound like a sportscaster or something. But then I made the mistake of saying like Hugh Hefner, and that was the end of it. My wife would not go for it after that. Besides the fact that Henry kind of sounds like an old name sometimes. Okay, 12-2. Where am I going here? Oh, 12-12. Okay, so this is a simple program. It just asks you to say enter number of integers to generate, and then it has a loop, and it writes random numbers to a text file, and it writes the random numbers to integers.txt. So let me just run this one time really quickly, and then we'll come back to the code so you know what this does. Okay, enter a number of integers to generate. I'll say 25. Okay, so it's writing to integers.txt. I'm in a different project now. I'm under Woo code example. And this is package chapter 12. So here's another way you can kind of locate the data file too. I'm going to highlight the name of my project and right click and go to properties. And it will give you the file path right here. This is on a PC, probably different on a Mac. So I'm going to go to that file location. So it's right here. And here's integers.txt. You can see last updated 5:52 p.m. Okay. So open this up. And what did I put? 25. So there's 25 rows here of random numbers, each on a new line. So now let's go take a quick look at the code.
I have a quick question. So does it create the file if the file doesn't exist or no?
It would totally depend on how you write the code. If the file doesn't exist, it might create the file, it might error out. In this case, it's overwriting it. Let me see here. So like let's run this again really quick, and I'll do a different number of rows. So I'll do 3, and then go back here. Okay, now it's only got 3 lines. Now let me rename this. Okay, so now the file it's looking for doesn't exist. What's my system doing now? Oh, okay.
Oh,
okay, so yeah, and actually I actually didn't know the answer for that code off the top of my mind, but it's quickly just to test it.
Yeah.
So in this case, it did create it, but we could add error handling to say if it doesn't exist, throw an exception and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
And in this example, we're writing to the file. Definitely that baby names program, if that needed that specific data file to run.
Yeah.
So that would have likely errored out without the data file.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so an exception is an error, basically. So it's when the program kind of goes off the rails, it encounters something wrong, like unexpected or wrong data type. And without error handling, the program would totally crash. So Which one? Let's see. Okay, let me show you another code example here. Well, even so this baby name program does have an error check for file not found. Let me find a different example here. 82. Sorry, I'm jumping all over here for these code examples. Almost there. Okay, so this code has a try-catch block, which I'm going to explain in a minute. But we can, if we comment out the error handling, this will actually error out. Let me add something here to create kind of a bug, and then we'll talk about the try-catch block to avoid it.
Sorry, what does try do again?
The try?
Yeah.
I'm gonna get to that in a couple minutes. Let me just first kind of break this program, and then we'll talk about how we catch the error with the try-catch block.
Okay.
So whoops. Oh, and then I wanted, sorry. Okay, so hopefully this will effectively break the program. So I'm in exercise 8.2. Okay, so it's prompting me to enter a number, and I'm going to enter a letter, W, instead. And the program completely crashed. So if this is a stock trading market in New York, or airline or train or plane navigation system, we're going to have major problems at this point. It was expecting a number. I put in a W, and it couldn't handle it, so the whole thing crashed. And this is where not just the error handling, but the design comes into play, because like it says, enter a number, right? Someone might think, oh, okay, so they type in TWO for 2, and it crashes. And they're thinking, well, I entered a number, I entered 2. So the try-catch blocks is the error handling to prevent that. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
Does Java have like a try parse method for exceptions like this too?
For which kind?
For Java, I mean the exception. Like throwing an exception when it's an like error, like when they ask you to write a string, but you write a number.
Yeah, you can do custom error handling using throw and we'll look at more examples of this to handle specific types of errors.
Is error handling basically like preventing an error exception?
Well, so in our example we just ran into, right, the program just crashed. With error handling, it doesn't crash, it catches the error, and then you can provide the user another opportunity. So then you could say, invalid format, please re-enter, but the program's still running is the important thing. So here we go. So here's how we catch that type of error. So this is a try catch block. The keywords are try and catch. So we have try, and then you have curly braces, and inside the curly braces, you have the code that you want to execute. So up until now, this is really the only code we've had in our programs, the code that we want to actually run. Then you have the catch keyword, and you can specify specific types of exceptions. And if that exception is encountered, then instead of the program crashing, like in our example, that program flow execution would fall into this code segment, and you can have code to handle the exception. And that might mean, oh, the file didn't exist, so let's create the file, or the user entered the wrong format, so let's tell them the correct format, stuff like that. So it gives you like a second chance to fix the problem without just totally crashing the program. So here's a try catch block, try, and then they try to establish the connection with the data file. Scanner in equals new scanner, new file of file name, system.out.println, input.next line. So they're trying to read from this file. But then for the catch block, it has catch, file not found exception, E, system.out.println, file was not found. So the E is the exception class in Java. And you can catch all exceptions with one catch block, or you can specify a specific type of exception for each catch block. And you can have multiple catch blocks for different types of exceptions, and then handle those exceptions different ways.
Is file not found exception a reserved keyword as well as E? Is that something we made up, or?
Yeah, no, you're right. That's a specific type of exception, and I'm skipping kind of all around here. Let me see. There's a list here. Here we go. These are specific types of exceptions within the exception class. So index out of bounds exception, you might have seen that already. That's where we're looping through an array, and we loop and we go like one spot too far off the end of the array, and it would crash. And then all of these others, and they're very specific scenarios. Illegal argument exception, arithmetic exception, like trying to divide by 0, things like that.
So class not found exception, should it just be exactly what the code is, or the class we can replace by the actual class name, or like maybe our class name is file, then we say file not found exception, or we just keep the class?
These are like specific keywords for each type of exception. So you could have a try catch block for each of these types of exceptions, or you could just have like one big catch block for kind of any exception that you hit.
Because you wrote file not found, not class not found.
Yeah, because in that code, that particular error would be if the file doesn't exist.
Okay, thank you.
By the end.
Yep.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So does this mean by the end of this quarter we should be able to like prevent errors from happening?
Well, it means you can include error handling in your code. But of course, there's always, there could still be a bug in a program or unknown errors, right? But it just better equips us to prevent errors. So it's like having guardrails on the edge of a boat. I mean, somebody could still slip and fall in the ocean, but at least having a railing there is probably going to prevent some incidents, right?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's look at an example of this. So let's see, 8.2. Okay, this one. Okay, let me run this one time just to show you what this is doing. Okay, it says enter a number. So I enter 3. And it says error not 0, finally clause executed, end of main. And we'll talk through each of these scenarios. Now let me run this again. Now I'm going to enter 0 because they've actually programmed this. They want the user to enter 0. So they've made kind of a custom error handling. So I'm going to enter 0. It says I'm happy with the input. Finally clause executed, end of main. Now I'm going to run it 3rd time. Okay, it says enter a number. And I'm going to enter a letter. I'll enter Q. And now it says invalid entry, but notice it didn't crash. Like the program still ran and completed. So now let's look at what's going on here. Okay, so simple print line statement. So enter number. And then it has the try block right here. And in the try block, they declare integer num equals scanner.nextInt. Now they're saying if that number does, so in this particular program, they're looking for the number 0 for some reason, right? Maybe this is, I don't know, enter number of people remaining in the ticket line when the ticket box closes, right? They want it to be 0. So if the number is not equal to 0, throw new exception, not 0. So this is a custom error handling to say, hey, if the number is not 0, there's a problem, and we want to generate our own custom error. But again, this is not the program crashing. It's like their own custom error message using throw new exception. If the user does enter the number 0, all is good, and it says, I'm happy with the input. Now, it also had, you saw it said finally clause executed. So let me get to this in 1 minute. The catch block here were never executed because there was no error. If I entered 5, it says not 0. Okay, throw an exception. It says not 0 because it's looking for 0, but still no problem. If I enter 0, it says happy with the input, no error at all. So these catch blocks never needed to be called because we never hit an exception. We did hit an exception when I entered the letter because it has scanner.nextInt. It was looking for a number. I put in a letter. That's a data type problem. And so the program would have crashed like when we first ran this. But because of this catch block, it said, whoa, if you run into input mismatch exception, go here, and then it outputs invalid entry, and then it continues to run. So again, the program didn't crash, so we prevented that runtime error.
What is eGetMessage?
Okay, so here, this is the catch-all. So here, they say catch exception E. This basically means catch any other exception that's not input mismatch exception. So this is kind of a specific error, input mismatch exception. This is everything else. So it's almost like when we had the if else clauses, we had if this, else, This is like the catch-all. And because E is the exception class, that's a standard Java class that comes with a bunch of built-in methods built in. So it includes get message. This will grab the error message that's generated. And this kind of stuff is critical. Like, you might have a program. When I worked at Starbucks, we had programs that ran every night when the store closed, and they would run at 2 a.m. And if it ran into an error, it would need to grab this error message and write it to a file, an error log file. Otherwise, we would have no idea what went wrong. So this is like the black box in an airplane crash. This is going to tell you what the error message is, which is absolutely critical. Whereas here it's saying, well, here we're overriding the error message with our custom error message, but we know that this is generated from an input mismatch exception, which is like the wrong data type. And then, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
And then just to talk about this finally block, the finally block gets executed every time, no matter what, whether there was an error or whether there was no error. And you might wonder, well, what's the point? I mean, if we want this print statement finally clause executed, I mean, why not just put it, down here, right? What this does is, though, it kind of organizes this code with the try catch block, and typically it's doing like administrative overhead cleanup stuff. So if we tried to write to a data file and the error was the data file's not there, and then we get the error message and stuff, in the finally block, we might want to do something like maybe we need to delete the file if like only half the data got written to the file and then the program bombed out. Or maybe we want to grab the error log and archive it over to the daily archive folder. It's kind of doing cleanup stuff. But remember, the code in the try block gets executed every time. That's just our regular code that we want to run. The code in the catch blocks only get executed if there's a error of that type. If there's no error, the catch blocks don't get executed. But the finally block, this gets called every time. So if there's no error, the code in the try block runs and the code in the finally block runs. And the finally block is optional. You don't need the finally block. In fact, it's more common to just see try catch. And what you could do, so like we could go back to code that we wrote at the beginning of the quarter, and we could add try catch blocks to it, which basically means like wrapping your code in these try catch blocks. So for purposes of the final exam, this is what I typically see on the final exam. They'll have a program somewhat similar to this. And remember how, so, excuse me, I have like gotta drink water, my throat's getting all dry. Too much talking. Okay, remember the different options here. So I enter 3, and it says error, not 0. And then finally clause executed, that's to show that the finally clause ran, and then end of main. And conversely, if I enter 0, then I get different output. I'm happy with the input, finally clause executed, end of main. And then if I enter the letter A, I get invalid entry, finally clause executed, end of main. This is a type of test questions I've seen on the final. The question might be, they'll show you this code, and then they'll say, the question will be, what will the output be if I input 0? And then you'll have to, the answer will be, I'm happy with the input, finally clause executed, end of main. Or the question might say, what will the output be if I enter the letter W, right? And then the answer will be, the output will be error, and then what did it say? Input mismatch or whatever. And then finally clause executed, and then end of main. So in terms of the final exam, those are the sorts of questions I've seen for error handling, is that those kind of scenarios, like given this input, what would the program output?
Professor, so if we input a number that is not 0, it's gonna print out not 0, right? Or what is the purpose of writing not 0 after throw exception?
That is, they're just demonstrating the throw keyword. So that's just a custom error message to say, oh, if it's not 0, throw an error message. And actually, here's a different example. In this one, they're checking the age, and there's a lower bound and upper bound. And the lower bound is 16, upper boundary is 19, right? So I think this is supposed to be for like, let's say a sports athletic registration. And so this might be, let's say, high school baseball. So we run this, and it's just checking, it might be that you need to be between the ages 16 and 19 to play in this league, right? So if you're younger or older, then there's a problem. So we enter 10. Sorry, you do not qualify to enter the junior competition. And then I run this again. I enter 17, input okay. So some of this is about managing the logic of the program. In this instance, entering 10 is not going to crash the program, but they're throwing exceptions, throwing errors around their custom logic.
Do we always throw new some custom keyword under if all the time?
So the throw keyword, that's more for custom, enforcing custom parameters. The try catch block is to prevent this. Remember when we had when I broke the program here?
Yeah.
Right, so this ran expecting a number, I enter H, and it crashes. So the try catch block is to prevent that, the full-on program crashing. The throws keyword is more to just enforce logic constraints we have around. And in the sports registration, age verification thing, there's other ways to do this. We could check these age ranges with like an if statement. But sometimes it's just cleaner to just kind of throw an exception and say, nope, that's not what we're looking for, sort of thing.
On the previous example, you have a block that says catch exception, which you said catches any other exception that's not input mismatch. So
yeah.
What would be an example for that? Obviously, if we enter one number, it gets us the error not 0, which is in the if statement. But how would we reach the exception in this program?
I was actually thinking about that, and because this program is so limited, I can't really think of any other example that would get us there, but let's try commenting out. I always get in trouble when I code on the fly here, but I'm going to comment out the input mismatch exception. And then now this is the only catch block.
Yeah.
So now hopefully we'll fall into that and we'll see what it does. Okay, so now so it's expecting a number. So I'm going to enter the letter J. Okay, so now it did fall, because now this has become just a catch-all. Yeah. Any exception at all, this catch block will catch it. So error is null. So that's a good example of an error message that's not helpful.
Yeah.
So that's not really helpful. But in any event, it did fall into that catch block because now it became kind of a catch-all.
Yeah. But with input mismatch there, like maybe would like a double number reach it, or what would that do?
Maybe, to be honest, I'm not sure. Let's try. So it's looking for, well, looking for int. Let's try a string. No, it's still null. So, you know, it should be getting a more detailed message. There might be something wrong with the way this is coded. So I'm not sure why that is null. Should be more descriptive. So I'm not sure offhand why it's not.
Okay.
But good good question. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I got a good question. So does catch not always have to be inside try? It can be outside of it?
So it always has to be like this. This is the try block. So it's got beginning and end curly braces. Everything else inside is just doing like whatever. And then the catch block is here. And I like this format better. But either style is fine. But
yeah.
So it's kind of like a if else clause. The try block has begin and end curly brace. The catch block has begin and end curly brace. Same with the finally block.
Just in one of the previous examples, I just saw catch was inside try, and I thought that was always the case. Or
Was
maybe
it
I
this
saw
guy?
wrong. Oh, so it was outside of it. Oh, okay. I guess I saw it wrong. Sorry.
That's okay, but you could probably have nested try catch blocks. So
what would the difference be?
well,
I mean, how would it look different? Yeah. Sorry.
So here's our try. Well, let's go back to this. This example is a little more simple. Here's a try catch block, and so we're trying this code, and then here's our code that we want to execute. Blah blah blah. But maybe in here, okay, maybe like this. If number is not 0, maybe we want to then do something else. And when we do the something else, then maybe we want to wrap that in a try catch block. So it could be nested like that. Just like a if then else. I mean, these curly braces in Java really determine the nested levels of the program flow like that.
I see. Thank you.
So is finally like the finally keyword, is it mainly used for like debugging purposes maybe? Or like what's yeah.
It's well, it's code that you want to get executed every time, regardless of if there's an error or not. And I've honestly, I always wondered, well, what's the purpose of it then? Why not just add the code? But I've honestly never seen a really good answer to that question. But I think it's more structural. Like this kind of ties the code to this block of code.
Okay. And it doesn't have to be used with like try catch, right? It could just be on its own.
No, the finally is part of a try catch block. So
okay, so it's like all three together.
Yeah, it's the finally block is optional, but you only have the finally block if you have the try.
Try catch. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, now let me check one other thing here. Okay, assertions. Let me talk about assertions now. Okay, I'm gonna exit out of these guys. And these slides kind of jump around. Let me see if there's an assertion slide here. I'm pretty sure it was in this. Oh, so the finally block, they're saying finally is often used for common cleanup code, but it still doesn't really answer a question of like, well, why not just put the code after the whole thing? But
yeah.
Okay, assertions. Okay, so with assertions, assertions are meant to catch not bugs in the code, but logical conditions that we do or don't want to happen. So, and the other thing is we can use them in development and in debug and testing. And then when the code moves to production, we can flip the switch and disable all the assertions. So this would be conditions like assert that the airplane elevation is greater than 0 feet, or assert that the temperature at the ski resort is above freezing, or assert that the age of person entering the bar is 21 or older. You know, in those programs, the program might not crash if elevation equals -100, if age equals 19, if the score in the soccer game is -10, the code might work fine. But logically, it doesn't make sense to have a score in a soccer game that's negative, right? So we use assertions to check logical conditions, but these are not runtime errors that would crash our program. And we can turn these off because maybe in production it would just never happen. Like, you know, in a real soccer game, a score is never going to be 0. It's just not allowed in the rules. So when we're developing, it could be a video game or a scoreboard application. We might want an assertion to say, hey, assert that the score is 0 or above. But then in production, we turn it off because we don't need to check like that. So command line to turn it off, turn it on, we would say java/java-enable assertions. In Eclipse, there's a menu path for this. Here, they're using a binary search method. One requirement of a binary search is that the data in the array is sorted, like in ascending order. So they use the keyword assert to say assert is sorted. They're passing in the object A. That's all I have on that. So now let me show you the code example here. Okay, so this is a simple example, like for a pub or bar. So import java.util, public class assert example, public static void main, scanner equals new scanner system.in, system.out, enter your age. So then int value equals scanner.next int. And then we have assert value is greater than or equal to 21. Otherwise, underage for pub. And system.out value is, and then the value. So simple thing here.
Professor?
Now, yeah.
I just had a quick question. So I kind of get what assert does, but what are the actual practical applications? Is it just a security thing to prevent something weird from happening in the JVM or during compile? Or
from my developer days, I saw it used for really for testing and development. So we, like at Starbucks, we would run labor scheduling programs, and we might say like assert environment equals QA. And it would be like a safety check to say, do not run this in production because you're going to go in, if it's production and we run it for store 115, we're going to wipe out their labor schedule for the week. So we would say like assert environment equals QA. It was really meant as a development, dev, QA function. And then when it moved to production, we would turn that off because the check to see if it was QA or production was no longer applicable.
Is this in Java or is?
It exists in other languages too. I think. It's
I was asking about your experience because I've had to use it in Rust before, but I've never. Yeah, it's my first time seeing it in Java.
Oh yeah, no. Well, at Starbucks, I actually programmed in Visual Basic 6, and then I programmed in C using a Borland compiler, really old, and then later a little bit of C++.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I learned Virtual Basic a while back, but yeah, not a fun language anyway.
Yeah, the funny thing was, well, I looked for my menu option that I forgot where it exists. I was in a dev group with a bunch of old guys, and they programmed in C, and if you're lucky, C++. And if they wanted to do something really simple, like create a pop-up menu or move a file, they would have to code, whatever, 100 lines of code. And Visual Basic at the time was a newer language. And with 5 lines of code, I could do a pop-up box, move a file, print hello world, whatever. And these guys became like really insecure, like, hey, this 23-year-old dude is coming in here and whipping out code that it really quickly, and he's a junior developer. And at one point, this guy tried to implement a coding standard for the group to say that Visual Basic wasn't an acceptable language to use because it wasn't secure. I mean, it was BS. Basically, the guy was worried about his job, and I had to escalate it.
Yeah, it seems like Python's kind of fulfilled that role, though there are problems because Python and Visual Basic can have some pretty serious performance problems if you try and do heavy stuff.
No, totally, yeah. But there's a lot of politics that can happen on these dev teams too. Okay, if I can't remember where this function is, I'm gonna Google it, but I'm not gonna. I know I can find this. Let's see here. Project properties. Okay, this is okay. One last try here. Run configurations. That's it. Okay, so I went to run configurations, and I'm in. There might be a quicker way to get here. Hold on. Oh, maybe not. Sorry. Okay. Run configurations. I'm in JH examples, assert example. Why? Well, I think, oh, no, exercise A2. Here we go. This looks a little, oh, now it's running. Okay, hold on. Run configurations. Well, in the argument tab, you type -E. Oh, it's here. -EA for enable assertions. But I don't remember having to actually select my code over here. But maybe it's already enabled. Well, let's give this a run. I haven't used that in a while. Oh, I think it worked too. So I think assertions are enabled. But what I'm trying to show you is that because Eclipse is not command line, what would normally be a command line argument, you input into the run configurations in Eclipse. So I'm going to run this, and I'll enter an age above 21. I'll say 25. So it says values 25, all is good. But like the first time when I run it and I enter an age under 21, I'll enter 20, it crashed. So using that assertion statement right here, we made the program error out, even though normally there's nothing wrong with putting value 21 into int value. But yeah, this would be more for development and QA. And now let me see if I can disable the assertions. So I'll go into here, and that EA, I'm going to remove that. This looks different over here for some reason. I don't know. Maybe I have a different setting turned on than I remember. So now I'm going to run it. I'll enter 18. Okay, so now you notice it did not error out because assertions are disabled. But really the main thing I want to get across, and this is the type of question I would normally put on a quiz or a final exam, is the difference between a try-catch block and assertions. So the try-catch block is to prevent this. It's expecting a number, I enter H, and it crashes. But the assertion is to prevent a logical scenario that would normally the code would not have any problem with, like the age under 21. So is that clear?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm
yeah.
sorry. I didn't really understand. So does that underage, the sentence underage for pub, when does that show up?
This is a custom error. So this colon is a if-else condition. So assert value is greater than or equal to 21, else produce this error right here.
So when you entered 15, it should have produced underage for pub?
So it's asserting, saying, is it true that the value is greater than or equal to 21? If it's not, the assertion fails. So it's
okay, sorry.
So it's like the assertion statement confirms that this statement is true. If it's not true, then there's an error.
Can you enter 22?
Run it with 22?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, but I turned off assertions, but so here's value.
Okay.
But we can put it back in. So run.
Is there a reason why a programmer would turn it off while doing it, or did you just do it for class?
Really, when it goes to production. So because in production, maybe. Oh, what did I do here?
Is it a space EA?
Yeah, probably. Or maybe no space. Yeah. This is really kind of for internal dev QA work where this might not be an error you want in production. If this is a hypothetical, if this is some kind of POS software for a bar and somebody scans their ID and they're underage, yeah, you might want a pop-up message, but you don't want the program to crash, right? So this is basically stuff that you would use as a development tool that would typically, the reason they make it so you can turn it on and off is because you would toggle it off when you move to production.
I see. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to cover in those chapters. Let me just double check here. Yeah, okay, let me talk about JUnit now.
Hey, really quick.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like if-else statements could handle a lot of the error handling that I guess try-catch methods would use. What is the biggest difference between the two?
Well, the try-catch methods can use that, are specifically designed and built to use that exception class object, where, you know, the exception E, and then that brings in all the built-in methods around the exception class, like get error message and this and that. You wouldn't really have that necessarily using a if-else block. Using if-else blocks, you would have to do a lot of, you would have to kind of reinvent the wheel and custom code a lot of stuff that's automatically built into that exception class.
Right. Right, that makes sense.
And then the assertions, yeah, you could do those with if-else blocks, but then to turn those off, like the assertions, you can just flip the switch, turn them off by removing that one line in the configurations. But if-else blocks, you'd have to go into all the code and like comment out the if-else conditions. Now, having said that though, a really good way to debug, and something that I and many of the developers I worked with, what we would do frequently is in our code, we would write print state. We would just litter it with print statements. Like right here, you know, it says enter your age, and then we have, you know, int value equals scanner.nextInt. Well, maybe the age is getting hosed somewhere down in the code, but we can't figure out where it's changing. So we would have like things like this: age equals, and then we print out value, right? And oh wait, why does it not like that? Oh, whoops! I need a plus here. Okay, so maybe this is a really long program, and at one point the age is correct, and then somewhere along the line it changes and the whole program breaks. This was a real common testing thing. We would just litter these, you know, print out the age everywhere, and then we can see what the program's doing. And, you know, I might put a little tag in here like Joe to do. And then when I'm done, I might search on Joe to do and delete all of these. But that's a really useful debugging method too. So now when we run this, we get all these extra print statements. But if it were changing, we would know it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the JUnit test tool uses assertions to test the expected results and the actual results in code. There's the whole topic of testing is a huge topic. There are entire classes that last all quarter or all year on just the topic of QA and testing. But with testing, there's unit testing, and unit testing is where just the developer is testing their own code, and you might test specific functions one at a time to make sure they work. That's what this tool is used for. As a side note, there's larger testing efforts like system integration testing is where all 200 developers have checked in their code. All the code works by itself, but doesn't work together. Or regression testing, we implement a new library of code. We know it works, but is it gonna break old existing code, stuff like that. But unit testing is just the developers testing their individual pieces of code. There's also, I really have never liked this personally as a developer or even project manager, but there's a school of thought where they have what's called test-based development. And rather, they try to reverse engineer their program. So rather than write code that performs 100 functions and then try to test it and try to write test cases to test it, they actually have the test team write the test cases first, and then that's handed to the dev team, and they're told to develop solutions to pass all the tests. I personally think that's goofy, but just so you know, that methodology is out there. But with unit testing, we're testing individual pieces one at a time. The tool uses the assert command to say, here's a method we're going to test. We're expecting to get this result, like the value 10. Assert that the actual result equals the expected result. So the actual result is 11. Does it equal 10? No. So then that test case would fail. So this talks about the menu path in Eclipse. I'll show you that. We have to import org.junit. This is a test tool plugin for Eclipse. And it specifically uses org.junit.assert, but if you do org.junit.star, it brings all of it in. Here are the JUnit assertion methods built in. So assert true, and inside the parentheses will be a condition, and it's asserting that that condition evaluates to true. Boolean value, so true or false. Assert false, assert equals, assert same, assert not same, assert null, assert not null, and fail. And you want to know something funny? The guy that wrote this, Marty Stepp, is the author of our textbook. He teaches at the University of Washington, so this was a different class over there. Okay, I think I can probably go right into the tool here. Okay, tips for testing. So you want to look at boundary cases. So whether if it's an array, you want to look at instances where I equals 0 and then I equals the maximum length of the array, or maybe make sure it's not gone too far, gone off the end of the array. Where values are 0 or null or negative, and then combinations of all of the above. Okay, this is a test-driven development I already talked about. And I posted these slides to Canvas too, if you want to save them off. Okay, let me go right into the tool here. Oh, here we go. I was losing my mind. I couldn't find my example. Okay. Okay, so here's a class called calculate. Okay, and notice it's a method named sum, and it's inside a class named calculate. And there's no main method here. So this is just a standalone class, and think of like large software projects where we might have 25 developers writing code for this project. And they've gone through the specs and the managers have determined, okay, we're going to need about 200 different methods, and they write functional and technical specification documents to map out what each method or class needs to do. And the developers then write those methods. So these are not in a main method, and they're not even in a program. And so with something like JUnit, we can test these methods, unit test them. And so the tool is taking the place of the main method. Normally, to run this method, we would need a program with the main method, public static void main, to run this. And maybe we would create an object of class calculate, calculate, the object might be named A, and then we call a.sum and so forth. But there's a lot of overhead to writing a program and writing the main method and all that. But with this tool, we just have one method, and it's inside a class. So let's look at this method. So it's named sum, and you can still hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
I don't want to talk for an hour and then be like, oh, I lost connection. Okay, so here's a method named sum. It returns an int, and it takes two parameters, int var1, int var2. So basically, it's taking two numbers, and it's adding them together, and it's returning the sum. That's all it's doing. So system.out.println, adding values var1 plus var2, return var1 plus var2. That's all it's doing. So you pass it two numbers, it returns the sum like a calculator. Then we have a JUnit test for this. So here's our JUnit test, and it's called calculate_test.java. So the name of the class that we're testing is called calculate. So our JUnit is just going to be called calculate test. And to create the JUnit test case, we'd go file, new. Sorry, let me highlight the package. Yeah. New. I'm going to select other. And then JUnit test case. I'll just go with the default. Oh, what is it not liking here? Oh. So here it creates the shell of our JUnit test case. So it imports static.org.junit.blah, blah, blah, .star. You could just add star way back here. Class example test, puts in this tag that tells it it's a JUnit test. And this fail not yet implemented, this is really a placeholder to tell the developer, hey, you haven't written code for this yet. But so that's what this is. It's already written. So this is a JUnit test. So the name of our class is calculate test, simply the name of the class we're testing plus the word test. That's just a style thing to make it clean, to be really clear as to which class we're testing. So the first step, we create an object of the class we're testing. So we're going to test our calculate class. So we say calculation equals new calculate. So this is our object. Calculation is an object of the calculate class. And now these are my two variables here, the actual result and the expected result. So the expected result is this one, int test sum equals 7. So this is what we're expecting to get back if our code works. And this is going to be the actual result. So int sum equals calculation.sum. This is the name of our object, our class object, calculation dot sum. And we're going to pass in 2 and 5. And we're going to expect to get back 7. So, and now here we have our method, our test method inside the class, public void test sum. It's simply the name of the method we're testing with the word test. This is a style thing. And you need to keep this at test sign. It's like a tag for the tool. So public void test sum. This is just a helpful print line statement to output the variables so we can see what's going on. So test sum, it'll output 2 plus 5, and then the result. And then this assert statement here is really the heart of the whole thing. So we want assert equals sum and test sum. So for this test to pass, our actual result of calling our test method, what it returns, should be the same as our expected result, test sum, which is 7. So now I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to say run as, and it knows that it's a JUnit test case. So instead of run as Java application, now it's giving me run as JUnit test. And it passed because 5 plus 2 is 7. And then over here it says runs 1 of 1, gives the nanoseconds, milliseconds that it ran. Runs 1 of 1, errors 0, failures 0. So we saw that it ran. So now let's make it fail. The easiest way to make it fail is give it a goofy expected result. Ideally, we'd introduce a problem to our actual code, but let me just say test sum equals 8. So now the expected result is 8. So now it failed. Now, with one class, this kind of looks, well, it is kind of, it's more trouble than it's worth, really, right? But if we had 1,000 classes like this would quickly make things far more efficient. So let's look at a second test case, and then we'll look at a test suite that can combine these. So
I have a really quick question. Is calculation sum one keyword?
No, so the class we're testing is called calculate. So here, calculation is we're declaring an object of that class, and sum is the method in that class that we're testing. So once we have our object name, then we call calculation.sum, and that's what we're testing.
So sum is not a word we wrote on our own, but it's like a reserved keyword?
No, it's actually the name of the method. Is probably not a very good name because it looks like
these two are related. That's how it's working, and that's how it knows like to sum them.
Yeah, it's probably not a great name for the method. It should be named something really unique, like our summation method.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's a good point because it kind of looks like a keyword. Okay, here's a second class with a second test. And I'll go through this a little more quickly. I just want to show a second example here. So here's the class that we're testing. So first day at school.java is the name of the class. And we have 2 methods in here. Prepare my bag and add pencils. So these methods they take no parameters, nothing in here in the parentheses. They return an array of strings. So add pencils doesn't take any parameters, but it returns an array of strings. And here's the array. So string school bag, it contains the words books, notebooks, pens. This prints it out. System.out.println my school book contains, and it uses the erase to string command. That's just informational to print it out. So books, notebooks, pens. And this method returns the array. So it'll just return the array. The array contains books, notebooks, pens. Same thing down here. Array of strings named school bag. It contains the words books, notebooks, pens, pencils. And it returns the array. Now, here's the JUnit test. So create a new, we import org.junit.star or .assert.star. Public class, first day at school, test. And now we create our variables for the expected results and the actual results. So the actual result is here, first day at school, school equals new first day at school. We're just creating an object of the test, of the class we're testing. And now we have two expected results. So these arrays, bag1 and bag2, they're arrays of strings. And bag1 contains books, notebooks, pens, and bag2 contains books, notebooks, pens, pencils. So that's what we're expecting to get back. So here are the tests, two tests here. So remember, there's one test per method inside the test class. So public void test prepare my bag, public void test add pencils. The print statements are just informational so we can kind of see what's going on. And this one line of code is really the heart of each test. So assert array equals, remember we had that slide where it listed out all the different assert methods of JUnit. So assert array equals bag1, our expected result for bag1. And up here we said that means it should contain the words books, notebooks, pens. And then we call the method we're testing, prepare my bag. School is the object name. We created an object of the class that we're testing, school. And we call the method that we're testing. So the return value of school.preparemybag should equal the same as bag1 up here, which is books, notebooks, pens. And the method assert array equals is going to check this if those are in fact equal. Same thing down here. Assert array equals bag2. Here's our expected results. We're expected to get back books, notebooks, pens, pencils. And then, well, we check, well, what do we actually get back from the method? So then we call the method school.addPencils, and we'll see what that returns. If it returns these values, the test will pass. Now, honestly, as a side note, I don't remember, and we could Google this and look this up. What if the array contains the same values but in different order? Will that test pass or fail? I honestly don't remember, but that's a simple thing to look up. You just look up how assert array equals works. And it's going to tell you, do the elements have to be in the same order or not? I almost feel like they don't need to be in the same order, but I don't remember. So let's run this test. Whoops. So there, I was in the class that I'm testing. I go run as. The class has neither a main method, nor is it a JUnit test. So it doesn't offer any option to run it. We can't run it as a Java application. We can't run it as a JUnit test. It's just a class with methods, nothing to run. But I go to the JUnit test, right click. Now it says run as JUnit test. So now, so it ran 2 of 2, passed. So in this example, I was able to test 2 methods in one JUnit test. Then you can also go like this, new. This is just informational. You don't need to do this part for the homework. New other. you can create not just JUnit test case, but JTest suite. And with the JTest suite, I already created that here, all tests. It's going to run all of these JUnit tests. So it's going to run calculate test.class first day at school test.class. Basically, it will run both JUnit tests. So you can see how if we had 1,000 or 500 classes to test, we could put this in a JUnit test suite. And we run this with one swoop, and it's going to run all of it. So
by
now,
the way, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Are we gonna have to do this testing during the finals?
No, JUnit will not be on the final exam, but the final exam could likely include assert statements and try-catch finally blocks. I'm just using this as an example of error handling and testing and assert statements. But honestly, like if you're in an interview or somewhere else, I just think it's cool to know about stuff like JUnit. So.
Oh, all right, thank you.
Okay, so that's the JUnit example. Now let me show you what the assignment is for this. If I can find it. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we have, and this code is posted to Canvas. So we have a class here, it's already written, temperature, and it converts Fahrenheit to Celsius and Celsius to Fahrenheit. So simple, short methods that do the calculation to convert between Fahrenheit and Celsius. And for the most part, they take a parameter and they return the calculated result. So that's temperature.java. And then we have temperature converter.java, which is the main method to actually run the temperature class code. And this basically prompts the user, enter temperature in Celsius. It creates an object converter, which is an object of class temperature. And then it calls converter.setCelsius. And then Fahrenheit equals converter.to Fahrenheit. And it just converts the temperatures and outputs it. So let me run this so you can see what it's doing here. Okay, so enter temperature in Celsius. I'll say 8 degrees Celsius. It says that's 46.4 degree Fahrenheit. I'm not super familiar with Celsius. Maybe let's try, I know 0 Celsius is, I believe, freezing. So yeah, 32 Fahrenheit. So actually the way this code is written, it's just going Fahrenheit. No, it's going Celsius to Fahrenheit. So the assignment is to write a JUnit test case, not for temperature converter, because that's the main method. Write a JUnit test case for this temperature class. And the JUnit test case will replace the main method. So, and let me show you. Okay, so download the two source code files, temperature.java, temperature converter.java. Those make a standalone program, but now we're going to write a JUnit test case to test the two methods in the temperature class. Test the 2 Celsius method and also write a test case for the 2 Fahrenheit method. Okay, so any questions about that? So I posted, there's a YouTube video on how to install the JUnit if it's not already installed. And then there's also these directions here. You basically, if it's not installed already, you download the JUnit tool, and then you go into there's a menu path in Eclipse where you browse to that jar file and load it as a library, and then it should work. But it sounds like most people, it's already installed in Eclipse. Is that right?
Yes.
How do you check if it's already installed in Eclipse?
So if it's installed, you should be able to click on your package and select New, Other, and you should see a JUnit as an option there.
Oh yeah, it looks like it's already installed.
So here, I'll give you a quick, this is funny because we're recording too, so maybe it won't be so quick. Here's the solution basically. So public class temperature test. We create the expected and actual results up here. And then here's test void test to Celsius, void test to Fahrenheit. We use the assert equals method. And here's a tip. This one has been a little goofy. And in mine, I had to use a third parameter, which is cdiff. And I set it equal to 1. And it's like a margin of error variable. But I'm more interested in having you create the JUnit test case and run it. If for some reason your JUnit test case fails when you think it should succeed, or it succeeds when you think it should fail, don't quite worry as much about that as long as you get this basic framework set up. And I can stay on for a few minutes after class too to help you try to get it installed. Although this YouTube video does a pretty good job of explaining it too.
Do we are the like examples that we just saw? Are the samples going to be posted in Canvas?
Yeah, they're on
All
Canvas already.
Right,
so
thank
they
you.
are. Yeah, they're up here under code samples. Wherever the code samples. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay. Okay, one other call out before we finish for today. So there's no class next Tuesday. Next Thursday, we'll talk about inheritance, and I'll go through a code example on that. Then we only have a few weeks left. I factored in a bit of a buffer week. We'll either do an in-class assignment group exercise for points, or it will just be kind of a buffer extra week. But a few people are kind of behind on the assignments unless you're working on them and you just haven't turned them in. So remember, there's the word search array program, or no, the Hello World one. Then the word search program where we search the array for a word. Then the resume builder program. Then there's the multi-array where it outputs like the checkerboard patterns in the two-dimensional array. Then the grocery item list we did in class. Sports team roster, and now there's JUnit test case. There'll probably be one more on inheritance, but that's not a big program. It's pretty short. And we might do an in-class assignment. So not a lot of assignments left, but try to get caught up because we're nearing the end of the quarter here. And you would want that last week before the final to study for the final exam. The other thing is too, the last week before the final exam, we have, there's this extra credit assignment where you can write a video game and then present your code to the class. Let me know if you're interested in doing that. If we get a handful of people interested, then I'll provide class time for those presentations. It can really help your grade because the grade in the class is a weighted average. So let me look at the actual numbers so I don't make stuff up here. Oh, it was in the syllabus. But let me show you an example really quickly.
How much time are we gonna be given until we finish the gaming thing? Typically.
You mean
How
for the
long
presentation?
Oh yeah.
It's just like 5 minutes. It's not really long.
Oh, I know. I mean, like, do you think we'll be able to finish it in a week or 2 days, maybe?
It's gonna depend on the game.
I would devote at least I want to say like a weekend to it. I don't know. I mean, some people write a program in an hour, and some people can spend 40 hours on it. So it just depends.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, Professor, I was actually planning on doing Pong, if you're familiar with that game, in using graphics, not terminal based. I haven't played with Java graphics in quite a while, so no promises, but I just wanted to say I am interested in doing it, but I don't have a final product yet. So.
Okay, who's that?
Jackson.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. And so the weighted average, so here it is, final exam 20%. I made that as low as possible. Quizzes 30%, assignments 45%, attendance 5%. So I think everyone's getting the attendance participation 5%. So it's a weighted average. So it's like 0.05 times 100 plus final exam is 0.20 times, and let's say someone gets only like let's say they get 85 in the final exam, plus assignments are 45%, so 0.45. But let's say you did all the homework and now you do the extra credit. So this multiplier might become whatever it factors out to, 105. So it spills over and will bring up basically your final exam score or wherever you need it. So the little amount of points it's worth actually has a huge impact to help your grade too. Conversely, if you're flat out missing an assignment, then that would be like a 0. And so like then your homework grade might be a best case scenario. It might become like a 80, and that's multiplied by 0.45% of the grade. So the extra credit can help, and if you're missing assignments, that'll hurt you. So the question about the final, no, it's not. There'll be no video camera during the final.
Do you usually like deduct points if it's past the due date but it's still available in assignment?
Oh yeah. So the schedule, the final exam is March 24th. So you guys need the last week to study for the exam. You shouldn't be working on homework during the last week. And I need the last week to grade everything and prepare and stuff. So if everybody turned in their assignments on the 23rd, I would never have time to grade everything. So you can turn in stuff up. I think I marked the 19th, Friday the 19th. So I try to be flexible about that. Just a couple cautions. So earlier in the quarter, like some people might turn in homework and I'll say, hey, this isn't quite right. And then they rework it and they turn it back in, and then they get full credit. I've seen a couple things happen, and I know people really like that I'm flexible and accept work all the way up to the end of the quarter. That can really be a double-edged sword. Occasionally there'll be a procrastinator that thinks, oh, no problem, I can do everything on the 14th. And then the 14th comes and they get stuck on something and they can't finish. So then I've had people send me like all the homework assignments on the last day. And then a couple things happen. If something's done totally incorrectly, you have no opportunity to redo it. So that's not good. Then you get low points. Or they went into panic mode and copied something from like the Stanford CS department website. And I mean, it's like obvious. I haven't covered like hash maps. So if the assignment comes in and they're using like a binary tree hash map or something, for someone that's been struggling on quizzes, it's like pretty obvious they didn't write that code. So I'm just saying it helps to get stuff in as early as you can. There's more opportunity for rework and stuff like that. If you just dump it on me last minute, there's gonna be limited options for correcting stuff and reworking it. So. Okay, is there another question?
So the exam, we should take it all at the same time, or we can choose whenever we want within March 24th.
No, so I'm gonna stop recording because now I'm gonna add my commentary. I don't want to be on the record saying this. The Zoom recordings are in the Panopto area. I'll need to move this one over to the public folder. So, so a couple things. At times, the department has had pretty significant issues with people cheating. On top of that, some of the other instructors really like to them, computer science is just coding, 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 nothing but coding. And I am more of kind of a liberal artsy type where I tend to focus more on the reading and the concepts and the meaning behind it. So when I gave, this is a common final exam, we all contribute questions, and then all the sections, all the different sections take the same exam now. Because the program, they're trying to standardize the different sections, which is good. But when I would create my own exams, what I tried to do is I would say it's open note, open book, and I would try to create assignment questions that you couldn't just Google. So one question might be, the Seattle Seahawks are implementing a new human resources roster payroll system. Write a one paragraph or one page write up on how would you design the system, what would be the classes, what would be the methods, and so forth. That's not generally something you could easily Google. Whereas the other instructors, some of them have more of a style like write code to determine all the prime numbers between 1 and 1,000, and then output them in ascending and then descending order, blah, 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 right? They're a little more code-based. So what I've tried to do is the guideline for the final exam was had to be worth something like anywhere from 20% to 40% of the grade. So I'm just not a fan of like final exams. I made the final exam worth as little as possible, 20%. And I tried to distribute the grade across different stuff, quizzes, assignments, activities, with the thought being maybe you can cheat in one area, but you can't cheat in all areas. But they're so upset by people cheating that this is like they're using the lockdown browser. Everyone is taking the exam at exactly the same time. So you have 2 hours. So it's 3:30 to 5:30. I'll double check. They might open up the parameters of that by a little bit, but it's basically all at the same time. You know, like I said, I would typically do my exams open note, open book, because even on the job, you know, when you don't know something, you look it up. You don't necessarily memorize stuff. But I'll caution you though, like I know students have created Discord groups and WeChat groups and WhatsApp groups and all this stuff, and code is shared, and a lot of that is inevitable. But two things: some of the administrators get really dead serious about this, and you never know what can happen if some code is turned in and they start comparing it. They find that 20 students all use the same code and it all has really unique variables. I can't guarantee anything. They could decide, oh, you cheated on the exam, you flunked the exam, and you flunked the course. The larger concern I would say is I kind of feel like, for the most part, everyone's adults and we're all here voluntarily. So you want to learn the material, right? So I tend to not be overly policing on the topic. And I kind of figure if someone's going to cheat, like they're going to cheat, whatever. But it will come back to bite you. You could cheat at Bellevue College, get straight A's, and you could get into another college of your choice. But if you don't, at the end of the day, if you don't learn the material, at some point you're gonna like fail miserably, whether it's at the 4-year college or whether it's on the job or whatever. So whatever you do, just if this is a field you're going into, regardless, right, you want to learn the material well, right? Does that make sense?
Hey, do you have any
Yeah.
tips on applying to the bachelor program at Bellevue College? It's coming up this quarter.
Yeah, and I'll just say quickly too, if people need to go, you can drop off because now I'm just sharing my personal opinions. And then we'll see you, no class Tuesday, but we'll have class next Thursday. So a couple of things I would say from what I know about the Bellevue program. It's kind of like politics in a small town, right? It's Fatma, the program director for our program. They're trying to build up the program. It is competitive, but they want to build up the program. And they're always interested in recruiting students for it. So oftentimes they'll ask the instructors, hey, like who are the students in your class that really seem to excel? And then sometimes Fatma or others would contact them and like basically invite them to apply to the program. So not that that is necessary to get into it, but if you're interested in it, talk to Fatma, talk to the program directors. They would love to know you're interested. If maybe you've struggled in computer science, but you're still interested, you probably would have an opportunity to go talk to them and say, hey, I know I didn't do well in this class over here, but look, I retook it and I did great. And, it's possible, like maybe you've struggled, but if they see you're really motivated, interested, then that would be the deciding factor, and then they let you in. So there's factors like that. My personal bias, and I'm just speaking from my experience, I went to high school at Seattle Prep, which is kind of a snotty private high school in Seattle. And a lot of my classmates went to like Ivy League schools and Naval Academy and Stanford, these really prestigious schools. And I went to Seattle U. I loved it at Seattle U. And, it goes both ways. Sometimes I've talked to people and they're like, oh, you went to Seattle U? Isn't that like an expensive school? Well, they actually oftentimes will give us scholarships that pay half or more than half of the tuition. But I've been around in groups where like when I was younger, I'd have like inferiority complex. I'd be working with people from Stanford and Berkeley and I'd be like, oh my God, I just went to CLU. Like none of it matters. It's just all about what skills you have. The longer you've been in the workforce, the less anyone cares what school you went to. But what I have really enjoyed are the smaller schools, whether it's Bellevue College or Seattle U or SPU or PLU or Portland State or San Jose State. although San Jose State I think actually might be pretty big. But so often at large state universities, the classes are huge, hundreds of people. They're arguably kind of there to weed you out, or maybe not weed you out, but if you need help, there might be limited help available. The universities have, it's like a name brand, right? Like University of Washington, that's like saying Lexus, right? It's a name brand. It's a solid reputation. People all over the country, all over the world know about it. But for some people, it's just not the best environment. And some of the smaller schools, they're more, good question. They're more flexible. They're less competitive. There's less demand. If you want to change majors, it could be as simple as walking across the hallway and handing someone a form or sending an email. They're oftentimes just more customized, more helpful. And yeah, they might not have the name recognition or the brand name as like a top state university, but I'm a big fan of the smaller schools, and I would put Bellevue College into like that category. Like I think in the 4-year program here, they're probably going to offer a lot more help and customized instruction compared to just like a big state university with hundreds of people, if that makes sense. And that's totally my personal opinion, and I'm biased because I went to a, Seattle U is a pretty big college now, but most of their classes only have like 30 students in them, if not less. So it's kind of like a small college atmosphere.
Yeah, thanks. That's interesting. I mean, because from what I hear, from employers, they don't seem to really care what college you came from.
Yeah, totally. I have really felt that coming out of Seattle U, it in no way hindered my opportunity. It's all up to just what you know, how motivated you are, soft skills, perseverance, effort. And I think also increasingly now we're seeing, how do I explain it? Kind of a social justice recognition that, you might have someone that went to Washington State University and you might have someone that went to Yale. And yeah, there's a lot more equal opportunity now, but oftentimes the person that went to Yale got in because their parents went there or something. So a lot of, like Ellie was talking about at Google, I think a lot of employers really look at stuff like, oh, this guy went to Lewis and Clark College, but he did Army ROTC and he's clearly motivated and smart and so forth. And they're really not going to discount the fact that you didn't go to Stanford or Yale or Princeton or something, if that makes sense.
I have a quick something that I want to share.
Yeah, share screen.
No, I mean, just the way I prefer to learn in your class. So in Tuesday, I mean, compared to today, I feel like last lesson is more understandable to me. I mean, maybe just my personal experience about the class. I feel like if you're doing the code with us, it seems like it's easier to learn. Just a kind of like recommendation.
Okay, that's good feedback. One thing I struggle with, so I think it might have even been last quarter, someone actually like complained about that. Like they kind of already knew Java and they had their sights on going to University of Washington and they were really looking for like advanced coding. And they got really kind of upset that like, oh my God, this guy is literally just like walking us through word by word, walking us through the code. But it's tough because some quarters we can have kind of a wide range of students. We have the ages could be different running start students in high school. Then there might be older adults doing career changes. I've had some students really struggle, and others almost already know the material and stuff. So it's hard to, I have to struggle with like trying to challenge the people that want to be challenged even more, but then also not going too fast if people are really struggling with the material. But yeah, I think that's a good point, that it helps to like actually write the code in class, right? And I was a developer for about 10 years, but I've been in project management since about 2012. So I don't write Java code, every day at work. So even the stuff I know really well, I get a little rusty on, and so for that reason, I kind of have to like prepare the materials ahead of time and then walk through it. I've seen the YouTube superstars where they get up and they're just cranking out the code ad hoc, and they can do anything, ad hoc. And I'm not totally at that level in all areas of Java, so I have to kind of do pre-prepared stuff, which makes it a little less real time sometimes. But that's good feedback though. So other feedback I've gotten too in the past has been, I had some assignments that were even larger, and people ask for assignments which are smaller and more piecemeal. So like short, quick assignments that they could crank out, get done, turn in, instead of like, oh, I'm going to spend the entire weekend trying to get this code to work because it requires 200 lines of code, sort of thing.
Maybe if anyone wanna vote like which kind of learning they prefer, that would be great. I guess. Like majority of people like prefer which style of learning.
So let me ask, do you mean like writing the code in class versus what? Versus the PowerPoint slides?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I try to do both, but it sounds like you're saying more code and less lecture notes.
I've actually done a mix of both. I've had both professor styles. When I was at a university back in Texas before I transferred to Bellevue College, I had a professor who did nothing but lecture us on theory. Then I had another one who didn't do any PowerPoints and just coding, said, here you go, Google everything. I just want to say I do think that you have a really good balance of the two. I don't really, as for the one person who complained about Java experience, I've been coding Java for a year and your pace is really good. I mean, I think somebody less experienced, I don't know what they would think, but it's a really good pace. Like I think you covered 4 loops in what, like an hour? Whereas my previous professor did it in 4 weeks.
Oh, wow. Yeah. No, that's good feedback. I taught at Seattle Central College years ago, and it was the same class, Intro to Java, but Seattle Central had a class before it, which was Python, which was Intro to Programming. And because of that class, people kind of came in hitting the ground running a little more. So so in this class, then we went a little deeper into things like sorting, selection sort, bubble sort, that kind of stuff, and search methods, binary search, quick, I forget the other search methods. So Bellevue College, those concepts are in CS211. The other thing that I don't know if I'd say struggle with, some colleges will have so the person teaching computer science will be like a math instructor. And so they basically come in and say like, I don't really know Java, but I'm just going to like deliver the material and you have to learn it on your own. And I'm just kind of orchestrating the class. And I admit I'm kind of doing that this quarter with a data science class at North Seattle because it's the first data science class I've taught. But in my Java class, generally, things like, so where I differ from some of the other teachers is that I basically have I work full-time in IT, and I've worked as a developer. So I've tried to incorporate things like the guest speakers and JUnit and talking about resumes and all that kind of stuff, just because I feel like it's more information I can bring to the table. And the funny part is 90% of the people will say, oh, that was like the most helpful part of the whole course. Maybe not necessarily for next quarter in CS211, but later on when I got to the UW or when I got to my job, like those parts were the most helpful. But then I've always had maybe, I don't know, a very small percentage of students kind of complain like, oh, I bombed the final exam and I'm kind of mad because like JUnit wasn't on the final exam and the guest speakers didn't help me on the final exam and all that. So I try to do all of it. And, ironically, the standard final exam, I think that the program was trying to standardize this. And I'm not saying any one class is better or worse than another, but there was just too much variation with the students coming out of CS210. And then they'd get to 211 and some were far ahead of others, basically. So that's why they're trying to standardize this. But yeah, the the class we had on the guest speakers, I could talk for hours on topics like resumes, interviewing, internships, all that stuff. So I try to include some of it. And I've had students connect on LinkedIn, and we've stayed in touch. I've helped them with interviews, or some of my former students, now they work at companies like Tableau or Amazon, and it's become kind of a good networking thing too. So,
speaking of that, actually, I was wondering, I had two requests. So the first one is, could you post the LinkedIns of the people that spoke if they're willing to share them?
Oh yeah, I need to do that.
And the other thing is, I actually wanted to ask you something privately, so of course when everybody's left.
Okay. Yeah, I'll add a page. I'll probably put it up at the top here. I'll put it right by class recordings, and I'll add their email info. So honestly, the guest speakers are, for the most part, friends and acquaintances of mine, and I would say many students underestimate and underutilize them, because all of those people, they speak almost every quarter in my classes. And they do it because, a lot of people enjoy kind of being involved with universities, enjoy sharing information and stuff. And every single one of those guys, you could have an interview at their company or somewhere else. And if they could help in any way whatsoever, they will. So you could have an interview someday at Google. They're not going to break their company policy, but anything that like Ellie is able to do to help you succeed with that interview, she's going to do it. And same with Paul and Nick and all those guys. Oh, Nick didn't talk, but he's another guy that talks sometimes. So I'll post their info here. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I have a question. So when do you think like students are ready to take an internship? For example, let's say someone with no experience in programming started doing it this quarter. Then, and when do you think they'll be ready to take internship? Would that depend on the person, or?
So this is just my personal opinion, personal soapbox. So totally discount it. It's just my biased opinion. So I have like 4 different thoughts on this. I would, so if you've completed 1 to 2 years of college, you could definitely do an internship. More than that, though, I would say, so many people are their own worst enemy. Don't tell yourself no, let someone else tell you no. So if you're at all interested, just apply for it. A lot of the internships the organizations are almost doing it out of community service. They don't necessarily expect to get a lot of productive work out of the intern. They're kind of doing it as a community service thing. So, you know, you've heard people, there's a saying like fake it till you know it or something. I mean, just go for it. Like, what's the worst that can happen? But the other thing I'd say about internships is companies use them for PR, public relations. And I worked at a recruiting group at Starbucks, and they would go to these job fairs, and they'd go to like University of Washington job fair, diversity job fair, all these job fairs. And they just wanted to be seen there with their big Starbucks banner. They were not always even looking to actually hire anyone. It was all like a marketing publicity stunt. And a lot of times with these internships, they advertise the internships heavily. They get 1 million applicants. They have really stringent guidelines. Oh, you have to be a junior in college, and you have to apply by April 1st, and then the internship's over the summer, and then blah, 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 blah. And like the accounting firms would come on campus, and to get the internship with KPMG, you had to be basically, you know, one of the top 2% in the class and all this. I think a lot of internships are not worth it. I mean, if you can get an internship, great. Like I said, I was a Starbucks barista while I went through school. And then because I was a barista, I had access to internal job postings. So I applied for a HR systems analyst role. I told someone, and I don't know if I want to work in HR. And they're like, well, you're not planning your retirement. Like, just get your foot in the door. So I took the job. Shortly after, they implemented SAP, which is a big, complex corporate payroll system. I was really young, but I got to work with these hotshot Accenture and Deloitte consultants. Then a friend that I played ping pong with during lunch, he became the dev manager. Then he hired me to the team. And once I had that SAP experience, it was like golden. I mean, like once you have experience with an ERP system like SAP or Oracle or PeopleSoft or Workday, they do not care where you went to college. And in fact, by then I had an MBA from Seattle U, and I was at Starbucks Corporate. They didn't introduce me as, oh, this is Joe Hufid, he has an MBA from Seattle U. They introduced me as, this is Joe Hufid, he was a barista at the Plaza 600 Starbucks down on 6th and Stewart. Because in the company, it was more valuable to have been a Starbucks barista than to have an MBA, because who wants to brag about, oh, we hired an MBA from a private school in Seattle? No, they want to say that they brought in a barista, and now a barista is running their payroll system. And there's other companies like this. Costco hires checkers from their stores into their corporate office. There's Oracle DBAs that 2 years ago were checkers at Costco. So that's what I think is more valuable. You know, if you're looking at a job and you have an option, I mean, I'm ignoring the whole COVID pandemic here for a moment, but if your option is like be a waitress or a waiter, you know, at Red Robin, or be a checker at Costco, I'd be like, you know, get the job at Costco, because then you can move to corporate. So my personal bias is more just get into a company and worry about your specific role later than worry about the internship. Now, yes, if you can get a great internship, by all means, do the internship. But I think too many people focus on the internship. It's really not required to get into a lot of these companies.
So I can thank you for your insight. That really was helpful. But what about like international students? Like they can't really get a part-time job at companies like that. Then and if internship is not that helpful, then what would you recommend?
I think you could get an H-1B. I'm not an expert on this, but that's what I've heard a lot of people try and do. But
sorry, could you repeat that?
An H-1B visa, it's, oh man, I'm forgetting the specifics, but it's basically the way that a lot of tech companies will bring workers over.
Yeah, the company will sponsor you, and then you can. There's different variations, but basically you could stay in Seattle or the U.S. as long as you're working at the company that's sponsoring you. That's the H-1B visa. So when I worked at Kaiser Permanente, this was about 2 to 3 years ago. We had an intern. She went to University of Rochester in New York, and she majored in computer science and had no work experience. So she got the internship at Kaiser actually because her boyfriend knew someone at Kaiser. So there's that. And that gets back to networking. But she came in as an intern, super nice person and super smart. But honestly, in her intern role, she really didn't do anything very useful or very productive. I mean, yeah, when we needed like stuff updated on SharePoint or something, she would do it. But she was really there to learn the office environment. So Kaiser Permanente had some problems. They basically couldn't sponsor her because she wasn't a U.S. citizen. She was from China. They weren't able to sponsor her for whatever reason. So she interviewed at Tableau Software in Seattle. Totally worked her butt off for like months studying for that. She's the one that used the LeetCode code to study for it. And what she actually did was, my director is a super nice guy from Germany. And I wasn't her manager, but I kind of supervised her. So she listed my director and myself as her quote unquote managers. And I didn't lie, but I mean, when they called me for reference, I just said like, yeah, she has a 4-year degree in computer science and we work in tech. And she never particularly wrote code in the internship, and I didn't lie, but I never explicitly said like, yeah, she hasn't written a line of code here. I didn't really say, yeah, she generally like maintained the SharePoint site, but she performed well in the interview and she got hired at, I think they started her at like $115,000 a year. And she was like 2 months away from being deported back to China. So Tableau sponsored her H-1B visa, which she's still on. And it's a super cool company. So during the whole Trump fiasco, they even told her if she gets kicked out of the company, she could move to Vancouver, BC, and they would still sponsor her and move her to the office in Vancouver, BC. So a lot of companies are like that. But you got to research the companies. There's other companies that are a bunch of old white guys that all worked in the U.S. military, and they all want to hire a U.S. military, and that's great. I mean, there's a role for that too in the world. So, but the different companies have different cultures, and you totally have to research this. But a lot of the tech companies will sponsor these H-1B visas. Sometimes I think at times they've maybe kind of abused the system where they will sponsor H-1B visas, but really there were U.S. citizens nearby that they could have hired. That's a whole nother topic. But again, though, like she did an internship, but the internship really had nothing to do with her job at Tableau. In that case, it was just saying like, yeah, I've worked in an office for 6 months.
Wow, thank you. Her story is really amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So just research which companies will sponsor people without citizenship. And yeah, I mean, there's H-1B visa is the big one. There might be other ones too. And I've had friends like this where some cannot leave the country. They can't leave the US or they couldn't come back in. And then others have to leave. So like they'd go home to India for a month and then return. So there's all these goofy rules around it and you really have to research it. But a lot of the tech companies will sponsor that. And I think there's more options now with the new administration too.
Thank you. That was really helpful. Thank you. By the way, are programming assignment 6 and 7 this week or next?
which are so this week we've had the grocery list that we did in class, the sports roster, and the J unit. It's kind of a lot, but we missed the class last week, and then now there's no class Tuesday. And there's not many more, so just try to make progress on those. Oh, the link to the J unit, I put those. If you go to this week's module, you can go to, here's the video, but if you go to this article, this has a link. It's probably just like junit.org. Yeah, junit.org right here, and then you can download it from there.
So can you guys hear me?
Huh?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I had a quick question. I'm a high school student. I'm gonna be graduating this June, and I know there's some internships for. This might be a bit repetitive, but I know there's some internships for T-Mobile coming up, and Microsoft, and they only accept high school students that just graduated. And I was just wondering, is that something you would think that would like help me in the long run, or is it just something that's not even worth it?
Oh, I would totally do that. Yeah, any of it helps.
Oh.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, any of it helps. And if any of you guys need any recommendations, letters, or anything, feel free to email me, and I can help with that stuff too.
And I just wanted to say, actually, I applied for. I know the exact internship you're talking about. I applied for it. It was a little bit tricky because they say it's a high school internship, but you need a high school diploma to do it. I don't know if you saw that, but yeah, it's a little annoying. So they'll automatically gut your application if you don't have a diploma.
Well, yeah, I already know that you have to. Do you mean like when you're applying, you have to have your diploma by that time?
Yeah, it was weird because they required you to apply when I did it by like May, and I was graduating in June like everybody else. So even though it said a high school internship, it was most of the people applying had to be like freshmen in college.
That is weird. What the heck?
It may not be the case for you. I just wanted to give you a quick heads up.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
Oh man, I wish I had the link. I used to volunteer. 1 year I volunteer taught through TEALS, which is a high school AP computer science thing, and I was going to teach at Garfield, and then someone from Sal Prep, my alma mater, was there, and they stole me away and ended up teaching at Sal Prep. But there's so Kevin Wang, who worked at Microsoft, let me share my screen again here. Okay, where did my Zoom go? Okay, this guy, he led the TEALS program when he worked at Microsoft. Now he started this Mentors in Tech, where it's a mentorship program for people at basically less well-known colleges, like it could be Centralia Community College or something. But he also started this other program where, because of COVID, they offer summer internships, and it's all online. It's basically in July, and they pair you up with groups of people and then kind of a mentor, and you do kind of an internship online. But the cool thing is, though, that at the end of the day, though, especially for a resume, it's basically an internship. He's posted about it, but now looks like he posts a lot, so now I can't find it. So it's not this Mentors in Tech. Oh man, where is it? I know he posted it. Oh, I'm not even going through his board. What am I doing? Hold on. Let me see if I can find it here. But it's I highly recommend it.
Oh, Jackson, I just looked it up, the Microsoft internship, and it's actually on pause this summer.
Yes, that's another problem I had. I applied to like 30 internships when I was a freshman in Texas, and basically all of them auto rejected me because they put up the internship and then they said, "Oh, oops, sorry, COVID, we're not hiring." I was like,
Yeah,
okay,
that's
thanks
what
for
they're
wasting my
saying
time.
for this.
Well, hold on a second. Let me see if I can find this internship program because it actually is perfect for COVID. My problem is I have so many bookmarks, then I can't even find what I bookmarked. Kevin. Okay. Kevin.
What part of Texas were you in by any chance?
I didn't. It was weird. I never left Washington when I was going there because of COVID. It's a weird program. I was born in Texas, and my parents signed me up for this program that basically gave me a massive discount on tuition when I was in Texas. I signed up for the University of Texas at San Antonio, but their CS program was subpar, to put it bluntly. I tried to transfer to WSU, and then I just said, basically, there were some hiccups there with what they were asking of me, so now I'm at Bellevue College. So, yeah, it's a tricky program, but I was at the University of Texas at San Antonio.
You ended up in a good place.
Bellevue College? Yeah, it's all right.
Okay, I know I posted this internship thing to Canvas last quarter, so I'm going to look there. Okay, give me 2 minutes here.
I hear UT Austin has a pretty good program.
UT Austin is basically Texas's version of UW, except with a worse admission rate. I found this out the hard way.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Worse admission rate meaning you can get in or you cannot?
Cannot.
Like
as in, like UW's average admission rate for the CS program, I think for freshman applicants, transfers are a whole nother animal. I think UW's admission rate is 10%. For UT Austin, it's like 7%.
Damn. Wait, where'd you find that?
That's why I'm in Washington now.
Wait, admission rate into like the CS department or just like the whole college itself?
The whole college itself is like a 40% admission rate. I think as long as you have like above a 3.3 GPA, you should be good. But the CS program is absolutely brutal. That's why I'm doing Washington State University, because I said, you know what, I'm going to have to put in a crap ton of work for a degree that at the end of the day probably isn't worth the work.
Oh, I found what I was looking for. Yeah, I mean, the state universities in computer science, unless you can get the easy A in all your classes, it can be brutal programs. Okay, so I found what I was looking for. Let me see here. This one.
Oh, my friend did this actually.
Yeah, I highly recommend this because that Kevin Wang guy is awesome. Anything that he's involved with is totally awesome. Teals was like that. So deadline June 14th. Basically here, it's June 28th to Friday, August 6th. I think they put you in small groups, maybe 4 people, and you're assigned to a mentor at a company, and it's all online, which is perfect with all the COVID BS going on. And they want mentors to participate, and they want students to participate. So they want you to do it. They're not trying to weed you out of it. And
are there like requirements?
I mean, well, let me send this link out. I'm not sure. I haven't read up on this in a while, but it's one of those things where they want students to participate in it. So I highly recommend it. And it doesn't matter that it's online. And in fact, with COVID, I mean, what else can we even do? But if we ever get back to normal office environment, whatever that might look like, a year later, it won't matter whether it was online or not. And particularly with COVID, it kind of has to be online. So like now I work at University of Washington Medicine, and they are saying that even after COVID, they might just stay, they don't really know. They might stay 100% remote, or they might say, well, once a week or once every 2 weeks, we go into the office, but no one will have assigned desks. It'll just be like a lounge, like hotel space. And you go in, sit down at a table with your laptop and a phone and coffee and a view, and you work. So a lot of these companies may never return to the office. I think it could have a huge huge impact on real estate in the cities with less demand for office space, and then also a huge impact. Like people are talking about moving to, if you're a tech worker and you work online, you can live in Aspen, Colorado, Bend, Oregon, Missoula, Montana. So I think it's going to impact the real estate in small towns too. But I sent, oh, here, I can put this in the Zoom chat too. But I highly recommend this. If I can find the chat. Okay, what's going on? Okay. So there's the link.
When you actually press apply for like I just pressed it, it gives you two options, the beginner track and the intermediate advanced track. Which one would be better, since I know I'm going to be finishing like at least up to CS211 before the end of the year, but which one would be better?
Oh, well, it says beginner track, for most high school students, intermediate track for most college students.
There's a prerequisites section. Like the beginner, if you scroll down, it's like you must take an APCS, more advanced high school engineering course, a college CS or engineering 101. So it looks like with one class, maybe it would be the beginner.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Oh, it's not paid.
Not a paid internship, yeah.
You know, it's funny. Some people really think that's like wrong, but I mean, students pay for class. So this, I mean, to have the opportunity, and it's not paid, but you're also not paying. So.
Well, no, you're paying here. It says, yeah, if accepted, there's a $250.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, that's the beginner
funny.
level, it looks like, but the advanced, it looks like there's no fee to participate. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that they might have changed that, because they tried to get me to do this once. I just didn't have time for it, and I never remember the topic of pay coming up. Plus, for most people doing this as a mentor, that's nothing. So they would probably do it for free, and I don't know why they're even. That's weird to me. I don't know why they even bother with that. But.
Might need to cover costs.
Yeah, they might be word crafting that. I don't think that money ever makes it to the mentor. It might just be to pay the program. Yeah. But I highly recommend this, especially if you don't have anything else going on. And I mean, it's online too, so you could likely do this in addition to school or another job too.
So this would be more for like experience, maybe, and like learning with a mentor, someone who's experienced in the field, and maybe like a Microsoft internship or any of those, Oracle, maybe that would be obvious if you want to get paid at the same time and maybe get industry like experience, would you say?
Well, I mean, it could be anything. Like I could be a mentor for this at UW Medicine, but I don't work at a tech company, so then it would be more IT, even project management stuff, right? So it totally depends. It could be anything.
Hello?
Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking, what do you do at the UW Medicine?
Oh, so I do project management. I was a developer for about 10 years at Starbucks. I started with Visual Basic 6, and then I did C++, and then I moved to SAP team, and I did SAP ABAP. But a couple of things happened. I never stopped going to school. I was always taking a certificate program through UW Extension. So my friends were always sick of me studying all weekend, all the time, like super nerd. And then there were politics at work. So I moved from the retail store systems to the SAP group. And I had of anyone there, I had the most number of years with Starbucks. And I had the most advanced degrees and all that. but when I switched from C, C++ to SAP, I kind of had to start all over again. They're like, well, yeah, you might have been with Starbucks 10 years and you might have an MBA, but you don't have any SAP experience. So, and then when I looked at switching companies, the number of companies that even run SAP in Seattle was like 5. And the number of companies that ran the HR module was like 3. So to make a long story short, I kind of got tired of learning a new programming language every 2 years and then kind of starting over every time I switch companies or switch groups. So I went into management, which is a common career track, because then what happens is you do a soft skill. And yeah, you need the development background, but if tomorrow we need an Oracle developer, you call a consulting firm and you hire an Oracle developer on contract. So because I realized at some point, I thought there's 18-year-old kids coming out of India that can write code better than I can. And I kind of felt I wanted to be more involved with leadership, management type stuff. And I also just got tired of like having to update my skills every 2 years. So project management, I manage, I might be on a project, there might be 12 interfaces that have to be developed. And so I manage like, here's a list of issues, here's a list of bugs. Okay, what's the schedule for the development? And then if a developer is talking to me about problems they have, or they're kind of trying to pull BS over my eyes, and because I have the development experience, I can work with the details of that, but I just do project management stuff. And the project management at a high level, it's just like there's a project manager when they build a new bridge across like Washington, right? Like you're just managing the work, basically.
I see. Thank you.
So do you find yourself still maybe writing code occasionally, or is it more kind of like,
No, it's one of the reasons I like teaching. If I had to teach project management, I would pull what remaining hair I have on my head out because it would feel too much like work. Whereas this is fun to me because, I used to be a developer and now I do project management, but this is different enough from my day job to be fun. But what I have found is I've been project manager on projects that involve things like payroll or accounting. And I'm just like, blah, like doesn't interest me. And I don't have in-depth knowledge. So I can do the project management, but if a finance person is talking to me about the finance stuff, I don't have a clue what they're talking about. But I prefer projects that use software development. At Amazon, I implemented a Kronos timekeeping solution for the UK. And I was in a meeting with developers and they were talking about an interface with time constraints. So the start date and an end date of a record. So like if you're in cost center 100 and you transfer to cost center 200, you're going to have a different record and your cost center 100 record will be end dated December 31st and your new cost center might have a start date of January 1st. But then you might have a future dated transaction. So maybe they know in June you're going to transfer cost centers again. So they might enter a new cost center record, but the start date might not be till June 1st. So we were discussing this issue with this, and I knew in detail what they were talking about because I wrote interfaces like this when I was back at Starbucks. And after the meeting, a developer came over to me and said, like, I thought you were a project manager. Like, what's your background? And then he laughed. I said, yeah, well, I used to write interfaces. But I can't do that on projects in finance because I don't have a clue what they're talking about. So there's a lot of careers in tech where you might never need to be a developer, or you might be a developer for 3 years and then move on to be a manager or project manager, but it still helps to have that computer science knowledge and background, even though you're in a management type role.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. I gotta go here pretty soon.
Yeah, if I could just ask a quick thing real quick, if after everybody's left, it's
Oh yeah.
I don't know if anybody has any other questions, but I'll make it fast.
All right, I'm good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I know it's getting late. I had a couple questions, but I'll just ask one really quick
Okay.
one. I guess in terms of like our ability to research a library and kind of be able to sift through a library on our own, like I mean, for Java, we would use Oracle maybe. I was just wondering if you thought it was important for us to be able to know how to kind of sift through that stuff, and if we didn't know how, you would show us how to kind of look through those libraries.
Yeah, that part of that is more about just reading code and understanding what the code's doing as opposed to writing code. What's changed? So when I was a developer, we used Microsoft Visual SourceSafe, and now it's all GitHub. So actually I've been wanting to incorporate GitHub into my classes. It's on my to-do list. I just haven't got there yet. But I highly recommend learning GitHub. There's free versions you can use. There's YouTube videos. Like you can't learn enough about GitHub and all the, not only how to use GitHub, like the branching and forks and stuff, but there's a wealth of code out there on GitHub too that you can learn how to search through. Beyond that, there's some specific websites that can be super helpful too with Java. But the first thing that comes to mind, I would say, is GitHub.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the libraries, I mean, that's sometimes when I dive into some stuff like that, I get my hand slapped by the dean because that's more CS211 and other classes. But I can look for maybe a quick overview I might be able to provide in another class.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Have a good week.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Yep.